This is a podcast from Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Adoption. Adoption changes lives, not just for children, but for entire families.
You know, at times this journey will be hard for people, but there will be high points as well. And it's about them being there through all of that.
In this episode, we meet the dedicated professionals who support adoptive families every step of the way.
We are very much the advocate for the child. So we're really thinking about what that child needs, who they need around them, and linking the prospective adopters in.
Discover how doctors, educators, clinicians and social workers come together to help children with additional needs thrive in their new homes.
So when we think about structural safety, we think about predictability, routine and structures throughout the day, and they need that to be able to thrive.
Join us as we explore the incredible support network that makes adopting a child with additional needs not just possible, but profoundly rewarding. Welcome to the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Adoption Podcast.
Hello, I'm Freddie Shearer. Welcome to this episode as we continue to talk about adopting children with additional needs. Joining us today are professionals with a wealth of experience in helping adoptive families to thrive. We'll hear from Dr. Rachel Bauer, a community children's doctor, Clare Hawking, a teacher from the virtual school which supports education for children in care, and Laura Sampson, a dedicated social worker for children. Hello, welcome onto the programme today.
Morning.
Hi. Hello.
Now, later, we'll hear from Jean Gonachol, a clinician with therapeutic expertise. Together, we'll be sharing advice, insights and stories to reassure and guide anyone considering or currently navigating the adoption of a child with additional needs. And we hope that by the end of this episode, you'll feel reassured that this path, while challenging, is more than possible with the right support. In the previous episode, we met adoptive parents of children with additional needs who've loved the journey so far. They found it incredibly satisfying with all of the support that's been offered to them. So on that subject, let's start with Rachel. And Rachel, as a children's doctor, just tell us about how you help prepare someone to adopt a child with additional needs.
So I think for any adopters who are looking at being matched with a child, I have the opportunity to meet with them and to talk to them about the specific needs about that child. And we will spend time talking about all the information that we know about a child in the broadest context. So that will include what we know about their birth parents. It will include what we know about the time of the pregnancy with that child after they were born, and then what's happened to them moving forward, thinking about their general health and their development. And that's an opportunity for me to tell adopters what we know about a child and for them to ask me questions about that information.
And what sort of challenges might those parents face?
So I think for me, often the biggest challenge is around the uncertainty. Very often we don't have complete information about any child that we're looking at sharing that information with adopters. And so there's a need to accept that we have uncertainty about what we know and missing bits of information often. So that's a really big challenge. But I think the other thing that is probably equally important is about the fact we're often talking about quite young children, and actually they're very early in their journey of development and in their journey into having a stable and nurturing family life. And so what children's development looks like is likely to change considerably over the time they're in that family. I often say to people in those meetings that my job is to share with them everything that I know so that they also know that, because I never know what might be useful to them in the future compared to what looks useful now. I also often end up having to interpret information that's given to me in a way that isn't perhaps as specific or as clear as I would like it to be, or areas where we're concerned about risks, but we don't have complete knowledge about what those risks might be. So that might be things like, for example, in some situations, the birth family might be known to have a learning need or a learning disability. We might have some really clear information about that I can share. But it might also be the case that professionals might be curious about whether a birth parent has a learning need, but that's not ever been recognised or understood. And the importance of that is that we know that there is a tendency for learning ability to be very closely linked to a birth parent's learning abilities. And so it's important for adopters to understand that. But there's also a discussion about the fact that for any child, there is an element about what they are born with in terms of like a potential that they might inherit, but there is also what they do with that potential, which is hugely important and is what adopters can contribute to by being able to provide them with a really positive environment and lots of opportunities and support. But there's also sometimes uncertainties about things that are really important in terms of affecting children's development and long-term potential, around things like whether birth parents have drunk alcohol during pregnancy, used substances during pregnancy, that we know affect unborn babies as they develop, but very, very commonly there's not a huge amount of detail or information about that. So we have to think about, well, these are possibilities. We can't tell you always all of the information. So you need to think about, the fact that might be something that leads to these children having additional needs that we don't yet completely understand. But sometimes there are much clearer things, like children might have already got a very specific diagnosis of a particular condition. That might be something genetic, it might be something different to that. And then we can talk a bit more specifically about what that might look like in the future, depending on what it is.
So there's a certain amount of piecing information together. You're acting as a conduit, really, of information for the adoptive parents. But really, from a positive point of view, I suppose, this is just about arming them with what they need to know.
Absolutely, because I can never know what might be useful for them in the future. And especially in kind of medicine and in health, things are always changing, things are always developing. And so any information is positive information, but it's sometimes just about remembering how reliable or robust that information might be and seeing it in that way. Because once you've got information, that's a tool in your armoury that you can share with other people when you're thinking about what might be leading to some of the things that your child needs support with.
Okay, let's move the conversation on to education then and bring Clare Hawking in, and we're going to learn a bit more about the virtual school.
Okay, yeah. So the virtual school, we are a real school. We're not online, as often people think we are. But we have sort of two roles. Our main first role that you will come in contact with us as adopters is when the child is in care. So during that process, we'll be part of the introductions. We'll be part of that meeting the child with you and helping you to understand what the child's experience of education has been to date, and supporting you in finding the next educational setting for them when they move to live with you. Also, it's our responsibility to oversee the PEP process, the personal education plans that every child in care needs to have. So we work very closely with schools to make sure that those are robust and that it's very strongly linked to the Pupil Premium Plus that we will allocate to the child whilst they're in care. Then we also have a remit for once the order's been granted. So that's slightly different because obviously we're no longer part of that corporate parenting team around the child. We are then there to offer you support, advice and guidance once the order has been granted. As long as they're attending a Cambridgeshire education setting, you can contact us at Cambridgeshire Virtual School. If you were accessing a education in another local authority, it would be that virtual school that would support. In terms of additional support that we can offer, a lot of it is around training. So we offer a huge wealth of training to not just to our schools and our education settings, but also to our parents. We offer attachment and trauma training using the virtual reality headsets, and that has been rolled out for the last 2 years with the aim that by when we hit the 5-year marker, we will have done every single education setting in Cambridgeshire will have had our training. We then follow that up with more detail and a modular-based approach for any of our settings to come along. And that's about then us giving them the tools to go back to schools and settings to then train their staff in greater detail. So it's not just a case of, well, you've had that training, tick the box. How are we actually becoming an embedded local authority around attachment and trauma? We also offer training around FASD, and that again is very much linked to supporting the school around understanding and the strategies they can use, but we also do a whole day's training, and that is often attended by adopters, whether they're on their journey with their young person, or they're in those early stages of going through sort of the training and assessment processes. But we also have a wealth of people who attend that, so it becomes a very rich conversation around those lived experiences and what it's like and what you might be facing and how we can support. We've recently set up some adopter support groups, very much linked to education. So we're working in partnership with some local schools across the whole of Cambridgeshire, and they're just to provide an opportunity to link people together so that they can then have that peer-to-peer support, those experiences of living the same life experiences with their young people. But it also helps then that we can then slot in. I can be there and giving that advice around education that they might need.
So it sounds like you have quite a lot of contact then with the schools throughout the child's education.
Yeah, so we work with young people that are attending right from preschool to nurseries, right through to post-16 provisions. So it's across the board. We work with those settings and the parents of those young people. I'm often it's about giving advice to those parents. I'm there. I often have very long conversations via Teams or phone calls with parents, and it's just often being someone there to listen about what their concerns are around education, what can we do, and then it's about hoping to empower them, to give them the advice, the tools that they can either take back to school themselves, or I can then link with the school and give them that support. Yes,
and from what you were saying, then there's a lot of support and actual education for the parents as well as the children here.
Definitely.
So you're kind of at the end of the phone on Teams, whatever method that they want to communicate with you.
Definitely, and it is. It's really lovely because I often work with young children going through that process of adoption, and then it may be that I'm then continue to work with them once they've gone through that process, maybe a year later, 2 years, 5 years later, but I'm there, like you say, at the end of a phone or an email.
Yes, which must be incredibly encouraging and very, I guess a lifeline at times for these parents, because there's a lot for them to have to cope and to deal with and to recognise along the way.
Definitely. And I think we have that when the child is in care, the team around them is so tight in terms of, the personal education plan process, the social care involvement, and then suddenly the adoption order's granted and it's, where's everything gone? But it's really important for adopters to know that the virtual school still is there, and there's lots of support and training and advice we can give to either them or to their educational settings.
And you mentioned earlier about some of the technology that you're investing in, and you were talking about the virtual reality headsets.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about what you do with those.
Yes, so they are. We've got a series of films that we use as part of our attachment and trauma training to help the people that are watching them to have sort of that empathetic shift to understanding the life experiences that our children may have had, and helping them to understand that some of the experiences they've had, usually have happened pre-language. So therefore, as a child is older, they're not able to articulate what their feelings are, those emotions, or what might those triggers be. So they're fully immersive, and they follow a young person from the womb right through to secondary school. And again, that sort of training is out there for adopters to have a look at. We're taking them along to the next support group that we're running, so that they can have a look and see what's going on. And we are in the early stages of developing them further with the company that own them around a series of films for FASD. So we have one film, but we're extending that as well.
I just wanted to pick up on what you were talking about with regard to the community of people who you help, and just how you link those families together, because I imagine that must be a goldmine for some people.
Yeah, it's really hard, because obviously I might have conversations with a family and I really want to go, you need to speak to these parents, but obviously I can't do that. But that's where the concept of the support groups came about, initially with the first school that sort of approached us saying, we've got lots of families in the area attending our school, we'd really like to link them all together. And so that's how it sort of developed from there, to have that sort of linking of other people together, because I think sometimes I can, in the best will in the world, I can try and understand what that experience is like for them. But talking to another family who go, oh yeah, I've done this and this is what I did and this is how it helped us, can really support other families.
Okay, let's bring Laura Sampson in. Laura is a children's social worker, and just wanted to talk about we've talked about the support for families from an educational point of view with Claire there, but what kind of support systems are in place for adoptive parents who may feel a bit overwhelmed?
Okay, so in terms of our role, we work very much with children with complex needs and disabilities, and we walk through the process from initially meeting the child as they come into care to moving through the matching process in terms of the plan for adoption with prospective adopters. And what that looks like is linking in with the family finding team, the prospective adopters, to really talk about who the child is at that point. What do we know? What's the information that we have that we can share, so that any prospective adopter really kind of understands the essence of who that child is at that time and what they've experienced. As we move through that, we will attend key meetings as the lead agency for the child, with the prospective adopters, to link them in with the wider health professionals such as the paediatricians, to link them in with agencies such as the virtual school, to really bring the wider multidisciplinary team together around the prospective adopters so that they really get a sense of who the child is, what their needs are, and who is around to support and offer strategies and any kind of other, ideas or anything really for that child to meet their needs. So we are very much the coordinator in that respect. We find that adopters come to us if they've got any concerns. So, for example, if they're thinking, we've heard that the child may have this diagnosis, what support is out there that could be part of that support plan post-adoption that we need to consider? We then go away and start linking in with the other professionals, with community services, to really think about that and map that out. That's really important. So our role is very much about knowing who that child is and moving through the process with the child, with any prospective adopters and with the wider MDT, to strengthen those relationships and make sure we've got the right adoption support plan in place around that child.
So, Laura, you and your team are there to help prospective parents before the order is granted. So, and I imagine there must be a lot of challenges to navigate throughout that process. So, can you just give us a few examples of what you do and how you help that particular journey? Yeah,
absolutely. So we work closely with the family finding team, whose job it is obviously to try and find prospective adopters for our children. At the point in which they share that they have found prospective adopters that may be a positive match, we will then link in with them. We will complete introductory meetings. We will conduct home visits. And at that point, if we think, okay, yes, this actually is going to be a positive match, we then look at introducing prospective adopters to the child, and we start undertaking those initial visits and assessments. The family finding team are fantastic. So they are the bread and butter of supporting children to be matched with prospective adopters. But like I say, we are very much the advocate for the child. So we're really thinking about what that child needs, who they need around them, and linking the prospective adopters in. So we will support from knowing that that's going to be a possible match, a positive match for the child. We will start having those conversations with the adopters. We will bring with us all of the knowledge of who the child is and their experiences thus far, and then we will move through to the adoption order being granted.
Now, the question really for all of the guests with me today, and I know that a lot of what we talk about on these programs is trying to debunk those incorrect perceptions, and one of them is that I think a lot of people still believe that only certain family situations can handle the challenges of adopting a child with additional needs, but we know that's not true. So how would you reassure potential adopters, including single parents or those with very busy lives, that they're not alone in this journey and they can do it?
I think what I'd say is, for me, all of these children, first and foremost, are children who need a loving home and somebody who's going to support them and be able to be in their corner. And that doesn't come in, and like children don't come in neat and tidy boxes, and neither do families. And so I think the key is really, for me, is matching somebody to what a child needs, and that doesn't look like one particular thing from my point of view. I think if you have a sense from an adopter that they are bringing skills that will match with what a child needs support with, then that is the thing that people will focus on and be important for any child. And that doesn't look like any one particular type of family or situation from my point of view.
So it's about the experience and the abilities of the individual, not about their family situation or even their income.
Yeah, and their enthusiasm and their ability to really kind of want to advocate for a child and to love a child and to be there for them. And I think it's right that people in different situations will need support, but it doesn't have to look like the same thing in every situation.
And you mentioned enthusiasm, and this must be one of the most important things you have to have.
Absolutely, because, at times this journey will be hard for people. And I think it does need people who will bring enthusiasm, who are in it for the long term, and who will recognise that there will be bumps in the road, but there will be high points as well. And it's about them being there through all of that, and enthusiasm to be curious about a child, to find out from different places and different people what might work best for their child, and then to embrace that and to just really put their child at the centre of their world, I think.
And having that ability to know that there is support out there and not be worried to ask for it.
Yeah.
As any parent, often we all need help and support. So it's not having that sort of think, if I ask for the support, I'm failing in some way. Actually, we all need support. Parenting is not an easy job.
And I think we would all far prefer that people ask for support, and we'd see that as a strength. People who struggle on their own, I think we would often worry more about that than when people come and say, I'm finding this a bit tricky, where could I, have you seen this before? Who might be able to help with this? I think we would usually be more reassured by that than by people who never ask for anything.
And that wealth of examples must be so useful, because there's always somebody who's going through the same thing as you.
Absolutely. And we find that some of our most successful matches, it's around that ability to be proactive, to go out and to look for resources, local resources in the area that could offer support, to come to us and say, we've looked at this, we've found this, what do you think? Can we explore? And then we work together to see whether that's going to be a useful support mechanism for the family.
And I think for me that ties in a little bit with asking for support before it gets too bad, because if you don't ask for support early and then you get to a point of crisis, then that often is at a time that it might be trickier to reach people. Because the reality is, Claire and I we hope we're not reading our emails at 1 a.m, but sometimes that's when things are tricky. And I think if you've put your hand up and said, look, we need some help with this, and we can respond to that in a more planned way, that, there will always be unplanned things and urgent things. But actually, a lot of the time, if you put your hand up and ask for help early, then that allows people to step in and to kind of plan how to put that support in place.
I definitely agree with that, because in terms of, systems within sort of our SEND team within the local authority don't happen overnight. So actually, the earlier you can get in and open those doors and be having those conversations, the more likely you're going to get that support. Even if you think, well, actually, I don't really need it 100% now, but actually often thinking of children moving from primary to secondary, we often need to start thinking about that young person's future in year 4, 5, not leaving it till year 6, because there may be that we might need to be looking at getting an educational healthcare plan if they don't already have one. And also thinking about the right setting. So it is better always to ask sooner rather than later.
Yes, ask the question and don't be embarrassed by it.
Totally.
I think just following on from that, I think that's also linked with parenting support, possible parenting support that prospective adopters may feel that they need once they know about a child's diagnosis and additional needs. It's about actually asking that question, we're not so sure about that specific diagnosis. Is there some support, some training out there so that we can further our understanding?
And Laura, there must be people who you talk to in a conversational situation or an official situation where they say, I can't do this. I haven't got a big enough house, or I haven't got the time to adopt, or particularly to adopt a child with additional needs. And there must be a lot of times when you say, well, no, you can, and I mean, how do you sort of unpick those objections that people might come up with?
So it's really about having those open and honest conversations and being transparent and thinking, okay, so what are the key worries that you have? And let's break that down. Let's think about exactly who could support in addressing that worry. So for example, when you think about home adaptations that might be required, we can link in with the occupational therapy team, who can look at disabled facilities grants for properties and whether there's any adaptations that need to be made. We can consider that alongside them, in terms of working, and obviously, the needs of the child in terms of caring responsibility. We can support prospective adopters to look at making benefits applications. So there's local charities like Claire's mentioned, Little Miracles, fantastic charity, who support with completing those forms with parents. They can be really tricky forms. So they will go through that. They'll look at any benefits that they could possibly receive. There's always people that we can link in.
And also from an early years perspective, there is additional funding that we can source for young people. So even if they haven't got to the stage where they have an educational healthcare plan, we need them to be in an early years setting so we can collect that evidence to apply. There is funding out there so that can be supported, so they can have a one-to-one support and access that whilst that process is happening. There's also, if you're claiming sort of that disability living allowance for the young person, nursery settings can also then claim an additional pot of funding for that young person every year they're attending that nursery setting. So it's more funding that's coming in to support that needs of that child.
And I think some of that that's available to all children with additional needs. It's not specific to the fact that these are children who've been adopted. That exists for children with additional needs, regardless of whether they're care experienced or not. And so I think it's important not to access some of those things that are available to all children with additional needs, thinking that it's going to be in some way different because this child's got adoption as part of their story or their journey. They still have the same rights to access all of that support because they have a level of additional need. So sometimes I think families perhaps don't recognise that, or they feel that because they're getting support from an adoption point of view, that maybe it means they're not eligible or not going to be able to access some of the other things that are out there, and that's not the case.
Let's return to Claire and just talk about education again. And what would be your advice to parents working with schools to create the most supportive educational environment?
Firstly, whenever you're going to start that process of finding a school for your young person, even preschool, go and visit, go and ask those questions. Every education setting has to have a designated teacher or person for care experienced children. That's a statutory role. So that's your first port of call, be going and speaking to them and talking to them about your child's needs, but also, we need to celebrate their successes and what their strengths are, because a lot of our training is based around, going from that strength-based approach, where are their interests, where are their passions, because they will have those, and we need to tailor that to the learning that they're having. So going in, and starting that relationship really early on with that designated teacher and getting in touch with us, and often parents want advice around schools that have got that experience in supporting a child with a certain need, but getting in touch with us so we can be there offering that advice as well. So it's coming from a sort of two-pronged approach. I think it's really important to be having those conversations early on, thinking about transitions. Transitions are often really key, and it's not just those big transitions of starting school or moving class, it's those transitions that happened in the daytime. How is that young person going to cope? What reasonable adjustments can be made? Care experienced children within the local authority is a protective characteristic. So schools are having to make reasonable adjustments to what those young people might need. So it's really getting in, getting into the school, don't be afraid to ask the questions. And if you're not sure how to approach them, that's where I can step in and support.
So the schools have the support systems in place, which is great to know. But I think probably what you're saying is it's important for the parents to keep on it, to keep that communication going right from before the child starts school, right the way through the process.
Definitely, because I think it's for any. I know sometimes parents can feel, I don't want to be that pushy parent, I don't want to be that nagging parent. Well, actually, we all have to advocate for our young person. So it's important you do go in and you do have those relationships. And, if things are not going well, have those conversations. We don't want young people to get to the point of crisis, and then there's risks of, exclusions or reduced timetables. Actually, we need to get that support in place. And again, picking up what you said, I think schools sometimes say that they get that support from post-adoption support, or they'll get that support from the virtual school. No, we should be accessing the same routes and professional services. And again, if schools aren't linking up with them, that's where I can sometimes link up with our SEND team and going, are you aware of this child? Are you supporting this child in school? Are you aware they're on a reduced timetable? We can start to work together and make sure things are done properly.
So never feel that you're being too pushy. Know that there's that professional support there, that extra layer to help communicate.
That definitely. And thinking for older children, what exam arrangements might they need? If they do need those sorts of support put in place, be asking right from the minute they walk through the door at year 7, be asking those questions and raising those, making people aware. And I think another question that parents shouldn't be afraid to ask is, what is my child, how are they seeing the impact of Pupil Premium Plus? That's a huge pot of money that comes into school, and hopefully the schools are aware and are claiming it. But what's that impact? How is that impacting my child? And again, if you're not sure, come and ask me, and I can help to unpick that and the sorts of things that schools should be using that for.
Can you give us a few examples of that?
Yes. So Pupil Premium Plus, obviously, once the child's order has been granted, it's not a ring-fence pot of money for them any longer. However, they should be seeing that impact. And it is very different to what schools receive in terms of Pupil Premium because of the family's financial circumstances. So it's about thinking, how are they closing the gap? How are they supporting that young person, whether that's through academic closing of the gap or social, emotional, mental health closing of that gap. It's not about providing the young person with uniform or funding their trips. It's about actually, where is the support needed? Is it around a specific, having that time to have that one-to-one check-ins with a person? Is it looking at how they can bring in outside services? Or just resources and time. Sometimes children just need time one-to-one with a person so that they're building that connected relationship.
And that can all be provided in the school environment.
Definitely. And that is additional to whatever is laid out in their educational healthcare plan. The funding from that, it is on top of.
Rachel, I just wanted to touch on how the NHS and indeed the family GP surgery can support adoptive children with additional needs. So what kind of ongoing help is provided through the NHS that people might not know about?
Well, I think the first and important thing is to say that the support that people do know about remains really important for adopted children and the rest of their family. So I think it's really important that we remember that the health of a child has a big impact on the health of the other people in that family and household. So it's about recognising health needs in everybody and making sure everybody's health needs are being supported. And GPs do have a really important role in that. So GPs are always still the first point of call for support when it comes to kind of very common health concerns that impact all children and all families, and will always be available to do that. I think when you think about what that looks like over time, one of the reasons it's so important that children and families stay connected to their general practitioner is that as a child grows and becomes older and then goes on to be an adult, then the GP becomes the key person from a health point of view. And if you've not maintained or developed a relationship with a GP surgery at earlier stages in a child's life, then it's suddenly a bit of a shock to the GP and to the child and the family that they then become the most important person. So what we don't want is that feeling like a kind of a big a big transition from them being a child to them being an adult. So we want the GPs to be involved throughout. And for example, the ways that can happen is if somebody does have for example, a learning disability or a significant learning need, then GPs will very often offer annual health checks from actually the time that child or young person is about 14. And that's a really great way of building the knowledge for the GP about the child and what they need when the family is still very much there supporting them, and the child and family developing a relationship with that GP surgery so that they know each other and they can continue to kind of meet that child's needs from a health point of view as they progress through different stages of their life. And then I think there are all sorts of other different components or different bits of the NHS that are going to be there for children. So for example, health visitors and school nurses are there for all children, and they're there for children who've been adopted as well as children who have a different experience, and they still provide a wealth of experience and support to families, just about kind of basic things that, a lot of the children are placed with adopters who've not had a child before, and they might just have really basic questions about, how do I help this child to settle to sleep well at night? How do I help this child to develop some healthy eating kind of habits? When should I clean this child's teeth? What age should I take them to the dentist? Really simple and basic things that health visitors can be there to support with, and are also a great point of contact in terms of knowing what else is out there and who might be able to support with that. Because also within the NHS that there are those universal things available to everybody, so that would be health visiting or school nursing or your GP surgery, but then there are more specialist services that are out there for children where those universal services might not be enough to meet a child's needs. So if we were thinking about children who do have additional needs or a disability, you would probably expect that there would be other services who might be involved as well. And that might be children's doctors like me, it might be physiotherapists, it might be speech therapists, it might be a dietitian, it might be doctors in the hospital. There are all sorts of different people who might be involved, and they might not all be involved all of the time for a child, but they might be involved at different times depending on what a child and a family need or think is the priority at that stage.
Important to get them involved at an early stage and to maintain that relationship.
Absolutely, because all of those people bring experience of children in all different circumstances that can be really valuable for families.
And also just to remind people that they shouldn't be afraid to phone up the GP surgery and book an appointment and get in front of their family doctor from an early stage and whenever they need help.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things I was thinking about when Claire was talking about schools is that I often see that families are really aware that people are busy. They have this perception that services are under pressure and that they shouldn't ask for help, and that's absolutely not the case. And we do want people to ask for help, and we do want people to reach out to health or education or social care or all the other supports that are out there, because they can then put in place those things at an early stage that will be really beneficial.
And just jumping back to education again, I wanted to pick up on something that you said earlier, Claire, about masking, and because I know for some parents it can be very difficult understanding really what a child has gone through that day at school, particularly if they've had a number of challenges, and sometimes that can manifest in all sorts of different ways at the end of the day. So I imagine that there's sort of communication strategies that you coach the parents on in order to be able to deal with that and to really understand what's going on.
Yeah, so we would always sort of recommend that communication between home and school, and what you don't want as a parent to be that parent that's being called over every day at the end of the day having to come and talk to the teacher. So it's actually about how can we develop those, so whether that's a homeschool book or whether that's having those opportunities to check in with school, and also having different ways that the child can leave school. So for example, often children may not find it easy to come out of school the way with the rest of their peers. So it might be that they come out of school in a quieter way, where actually they then are having some time to decompress, and then that transition, and then there's more of a handover with that connected person that's been doing that, sort of re-regulating them, ready to prepare them to go home, and they can then have a touch base and check in. So I think those sorts of things are really important. We'd also recommend using sort of ways to help young people to break things down. So often when you ask a young person, what's happened at school today? Nothing. Can't remember. I played. And that something's happened because of the way they're coming home and presenting. So things like helping him to break it down and keeping the verbal to a minimum, using, visuals. So it might be that you have a visual like, where were you? So they can say, they can find the one that says school. What happened? And then there's a series of cards they can choose from. And then how did that make them feel? But then also helping them to think, well, what could we do differently next time? What might help you in that situation? And so it's creating a sort of a dialogue for them, but in a picture-based way. Because we know that young people, when their brains are muddled, they can't always give the correct information across. So if we can help them in a way that is taking that pressure off of the communicating in a more picture-based way, that might help. But again, don't be afraid to ask if your child's coming home and there's something not right. Go in, ask those questions, know who you can speak to. And that's why that relationship with the designated teacher is so key.
Yeah, and that's a useful reminder, I guess, for the parents to keep that dialogue going with their children the whole time, to really understand what's going on in their worlds.
And also for some young people, when we're tired and we've had a long day at work, the last thing we want is someone going, "What did you do today? How was this?" We want time to decompress ourselves. So often, sometimes thinking about when you have those conversations, what times are right? Is it the child needs to come in and go and let off some steam, or do they need to come in and go and have a little rest or eat? And then when they're ready, they'll come to you and you can then start having those conversations. Or in the car, sometimes, when they're not, I used to have the best conversations with my children when we were in the car because they were behind me. There wasn't that pressure of me looking at them, and they could then tell me whatever they wanted to.
Joining us remotely for this programme is Jean Guénéchot, a clinician with a wealth of therapeutic knowledge. He supports adopters and social workers in understanding more about children's needs and how best to support them. We start by talking about parenting styles and the times when those may need to differ.
So therapeutic parenting is a way of parenting that's very nurturing and very validating with the children. Because depending on the age of the child and when they are adopted and their own journey and their own experiences, they can come into families where they have a lot of shame. They have a lot of kind of core beliefs of I'm not good enough, I'm unlovable, and a lot of mistrust towards adults in general. And it's really hard not to take it personally. And so the therapeutic part of parenting is for adults to be able to keep themselves calm enough, try not to take it personally, which is really hard in the moment, and really validate the feelings, not the behavior, but the feelings, and really try to be attuned to the child, because we talk about co-regulation. So if I'm, as an adult, I'm able to keep it together and stay calm, it's going to help my child also stay calmer. And when a child is calmer, they can actually reflect and they can learn. But when they are what we call dysregulated, so they are kind of upset and acting out, they can't learn, they can't hear what you're saying, they can't really reason, they can't be logical. So the more we can support them with their emotions and holding them, the better. So it is tricky because depending on how you grew up, if you get really stressed out as a parent, you tend to go back into old ways of parenting, maybe the way you were parented yourself. So the more you can be aware of those traps and the more you can be attuned to yourself and the child, the better. And then when you mess things up, because it will always happen, a big thing about therapeutic parenting is repair. Taking on that ownership around like, hey, you know what? I really messed it up earlier because you were telling me and showing me you couldn't handle this conversation. And actually, I was really trying to find out what happened today at school, for instance. And actually, I should have realized that you were not in a good space. So I'm really sorry that this happened. I wasn't really there for you.
Yeah, it's interesting what you were mentioning about how sometimes when situations become stressful, parenting styles might might revert to type, and that's not necessarily the right approach when dealing with a child with additional needs. So let's unpack that a little bit. I mean, let's talk about some of the strategies that can help adoptive parents to support the emotional and behavioural development.
Yeah, absolutely. So the two ways to support children to feel safe is one, that relational safety, this acceptance, empathy, really focusing on all what we call non-verbal cues. So it's your facial expression, which is really hard. So those children are going to be so attuned to that. Like if you frown, you're reading something and you frown because you can't make sense of it, they're going to think maybe they're in trouble. If you raise your voice a tiny little bit, that might be too much for them. So really being aware of your facial expressions, even of the tensions in your body. So if you can have a relaxed body, a very gentle voice. The other bit that promotes that safety, that regulation for the nervous system, is what I call structural safety. So when we think about structural safety, we think about predictability, routines and structures throughout the day. And they need that to be able to thrive. And, the same way that every Friday morning, I try to have my little coffee. It's my little treat. I like it because I know I know what's coming. I know how it's going to taste. And it's going to really feel really good. And it's going to actually calm my nervous system. I have those habits because it helps me calm my nervous system down. So it's going to be the same for their nervous system. So any type of routine that you can have in the morning, in the evening, every time you come back from school, we're going to have a specific snack. Sensory stuff also helps the nervous system calm down. So maybe something crunchy, maybe drinking something through a straw, because that also helps. So we're going to have those routines in place. It's going to be the same a little bit every morning, every night. You do need some flexibility sometimes and give them a sense of control, but you do need to have that sense, those structures.
Yeah, that's fascinating what you're saying. So to summarize, really, it's about maintaining a consistent household routine, checking your own emotions and doing things that you might not necessarily expect that you need to do, like regulating your own voice, the level that you speak at, your facial expressions. And I guess it's just about creating that safe space the whole time.
Absolutely. You're not perfect. It's impossible to be perfect. And actually, when you mess things up, it's going to create resilience in some ways because you're going to support your child. So you are modeling to them how to repair, how to take ownership, how to take responsibility on things. So hopefully over time they learn that from you and they can do that as well. But hopefully you can expand what we call a window of tolerance, the tolerance for unpredictability, that you can expand that a little bit over time in a gentle way.
And Jean, what is it that you love the most about your work?
For me, it is really learning alongside the families and just to see their strength and resilience. It's amazing. So many times I'm here, I'm sitting, we're having conversations, and I just feel chilled, because I'm so moved by what they are saying. Everything that they teach me around what is it to love, what is it to be resilient.
Thank you, Jean Guenechot, joining us on the line to share some of his expertise and insights. Well, now let's return to our in-person guests and we'll pick up with children's social worker Laura Sampson. I ask her for examples of how adoptive families have been supported through more difficult periods.
Yeah, so I think for us, it's very much that, they've linked in with maybe the specific health professional or agency that they need to with regards to that particular challenge. Adopters are always welcome to contact us if they do feel that they've got a particular difficulty and they're struggling to address it, and we can obviously support and advocate for the child and do that piece of work. But yeah, it's very much about raising those concerns, and then we work together to address those and think about how we move forward.
And having a good personal support network is a very important part of this process as well, isn't it?
Oh, totally. And it's about everybody understanding. It's not just about you as the parent understanding that child's needs. It's about your extended family and your friends, your network, understanding the needs and why you might be having to parent slightly different, and actually why you may not be, questioning or challenging a behaviour. You may be responding to it differently to how other parents might be parenting.
And I think sometimes what adopters find is that the people that they thought were going to be their closest or their best support and who actually are their closest and their best support are sometimes slightly different. And I think one of the joys that a lot of adopters talk about is the people that they've met and developed really important relationships with as they go through this journey with their child, because I think often they meet people that they would never otherwise have met and build relationships with them that they wouldn't have had if they'd not been caring for a child with an additional need.
Yeah, so it's perhaps a bigger community than people might actually imagine.
Absolutely. And in my experience, adopters that I've worked with, that community is vital in terms of understanding what's on offer in their local area, what services can support. It's often those links through adoption that really do offer the most support through that process, which is really lovely.
I was just going to say, I think one of the things that's often most positive is what Claire talked about, which is linking people up with other people who are having similar experiences but might be at slightly different stages. Because I think as professionals, we sit and we're not living the same life that people are living. I think for them to be able to, just in a social way, even if it doesn't feel like an official support, to have those connections with other people that they can ring, have a coffee with, just on a bad day, or to celebrate some of the kind of the positives or the things that children have achieved that might seem to other families might not seem like big deals, but to families in these situations are enormous and really a huge reward. And to have people who understand that that's something worth celebrating is really positive for families.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about the positives of the community that you get to meet and to know and to become friends with along the journey. So let's just talk about some of the moments of joy of taking on a child with additional needs has brought families.
There's a wealth out there of how those children can succeed, and it's actually thinking what are going to be the successes for my young person and not putting a ceiling on that, knowing that your child, I think, we talked about it earlier about knowing their strengths, because actually what a success might look like for your young person is going to be very different to another young person. Even within siblings, it's going to look different. So it's really knowing what is out there. I mean, and I've worked with some families where they've had amazing talents in sport. They have gone on to have some really successful, potential careers in that area, but also music. Music. Often I've met a young man who is an amazing drummer, and he's self-taught, and he plays things just. He can play anything, and he's going to have a career in that. So it's finding their niche, finding what is their success and celebrating it, but understanding it's going to look different for every single child.
And I think it's a bit about going into it with a mindset that allows you to celebrate what those successes are for each individual child, rather than perhaps having kind of fixed expectations about what success looks like, because I think it's very much going to be, for each child that's going to look really different. And if you go into it with that mindset, then there are so many things that you can celebrate that I think that's what makes it really rewarding, actually.
And parenting it's those quick wins, those easy wins. So sometimes it's just that they've got their shoes on by themselves that day, and that is the biggest celebration that you're ever going to come across. So it's taking that joy in those moments and holding on to them when times are harder.
There must be a lot of satisfaction in the jobs that you do as well, helping all these different groups of people.
Yeah, absolutely. Working with children with disabilities is incredibly rewarding. And I know from our experience of working with little ones with really complex health needs, those moments when they start to roll over or they say their first word, it's such a significant moment for them when they've been told that actually, they've got such a complex diagnosis. We don't know what life's going to be like. We don't know if they're going to be able to walk. We don't know if they're going to be able to see. And then, you've got these little babies rolling and moving and chattering. That it's incredibly rewarding.
And what are some of the rewarding moments that adopted parents have shared with you, Rachel?
There are lots, and one of the best bits of my job is when I see children over a period of time and I can watch how they develop over a period of years. And there are some children who come to my clinic who I've been involved with for a long amount of time, and I've seen them come for the first time in their school uniform, and that's a really it's just amazing to see them at that stage in their development. And then, I have families who come and say, oh, they've managed to make their own sandwich today, or, actually we've now got on top of all of these health things, they're so much better, they sleep all night now, or, little things like now they go and they use the toilet by themselves. All little things like that add up over time to just really kind of I think for me it's often a privilege to be able to watch them in that journey and to achieve the things that they achieve with the support of their family.
But of course, at the heart of that is the enthusiasm and the passion from the adoptive parents to enable the child to develop and grow in that way.
Absolutely. And I think, when I see those families maybe a year down the line or 2 years down the line, what I can say is, well, actually, when I sit here and look at all the amazing things that they're doing now that when I saw you last time, they weren't doing. And I think sometimes families are so involved in the day-to-day kind of, getting ready for school, getting out the door, making the dinner, all those kind of things, that it's easy to lose sight of that. And for me, it's really nice to say, well, actually, last time you came, you said, I'd really like them to be able to do this. And look, here we are, and they can do that now. And that's what you've helped them to do. And that, I find that really, I
think
really
sometimes as
brilliant.
Parents don't often take the credit they're due, that actually the impact they've had. And like you say, when you're living in that moment, you don't see what's happening. It sometimes takes somebody else to come in and go, oh my goodness, look what they can do now. Wow, they've really come on. And so I think that's so important that that parents take that on board, that they are doing a really good job.
Celebrate the successes frequently.
Definitely.
Dr. Rachel Bauer, Clare Hawking and Laura Sampson, thank you so much to our guests today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening. We hope you found inspiration and reassurance in the stories and advice shared by our guests today. Adopting a child with additional needs can feel daunting, but as we've heard on the programme today, with the right support network and resources, it is a deeply rewarding journey. Remember, you're not alone. There are professionals like those you've heard from today, ready to walk alongside you every step of the way.
Thank you for spending time with us today. We hope this episode has given you valuable insights into the support available for adoptive families. Adopting a child with additional needs is a journey filled with unique challenges and immense rewards, and you don't have to navigate it alone. To learn more about the adoption process and the support offered, please visit Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Adoption online or follow their social media channels. Your journey can make all the difference in a child's life. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to sharing more stories with you soon.